I was thinking about this today. People keep talking about an impending global energy crisis, but when you actually look around, it really doesn't feel like one.
Right, it feels totally normal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the lights are on when you flip the switch, your house is heated, and gas prices aren't exactly exploding at the pump, you
It's
know?
pretty stable, yeah.
So it feels like there's this massive disconnect between the panic we are supposedly meant to be feeling and our actual calm daily experience.
Well, that's exactly the point, actually. And
Yeah.
it's a brilliant structural observation to start us off with.
Yeah.
Because what we are looking at is a crisis that stays completely silent.
A silent crisis. Okay, and that silence is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us for this one.
Really do.
We're talking about macroeconomic white papers, geopolitical risk assessments, and some incredibly detailed global energy market analyses. And they all point to this core thesis, which they call the STA 9.2 energy phase.
Yes, STA 9.2.
Right. And to decode whatever that actually means, the sources use this analytical framework called LMOS. That stands for a lightweight operational system.
A very interesting approach.
Yeah, it's really cool because instead of looking at the daily news and, trying to judge if every single headline is simply true or false, this framework forces us to look at the underlying structure.
The mechanics of it all.
Exactly. We are looking at the speed of changes and where the pressure is secretly building up behind the scenes. So, let's unpack this. Starting with this LMOS framework.
Sure.
It sounds a bit like software jargon, honestly. What does a lightweight operational system actually mean when we're talking about reading the news?
It does sound like a tech term. I
Yeah.
know. But it's actually a really elegant way to filter information. I mean, think about how much cognitive energy it takes to process the daily news.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Totally exhausting. You have dramatic stories, political slogans, outrage, panic. Processing all that narrative is heavy. It bogs you down.
Right.
So LMOS is a framework borrowed from systems engineering. It basically asks you to drop the narrative entirely and run a lightweight scan on the operational layer.
Drop the narrative, so ignore the drama.
Exactly. You don't ask, who is the bad guy in this conflict? You ask, what are the actual mechanisms making decisions right now, and how are they shifting?
Oh, I see. So it's about looking at the plumbing of the global system
Right.
rather than, like, the paint job.
The plumbing. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And when you apply that plumbing level lens to the current energy situation, the contradiction you mentioned earlier becomes glaringly obvious.
It really does. Because, well, let me lay out the facts from these market analyses. Because on the surface, everything looks perfectly fine.
Right, totally fine.
The global energy supply is stable, the markets are functioning, prices are, for the most part, relatively calm.
Very calm.
But simultaneously, and this is where the mismatch happens, the underlying risks are absolutely surging.
Surging across the board.
Yeah. We are seeing rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and Russia. Major sea routes are under physical threat. Shipping and insurance costs for cargo vessels they are spiking dramatically.
It spikes there.
And then there's the timeline for actual energy investment, which is just completely detaching from our future supply needs, like the billions pouring into AI data centers.
Oh, the AI power demand is staggering.
So if you look at the plumbing, the crisis conditions are completely assembled. Every single ingredient for a severe energy shock is sitting right there on the table.
Right there on the table, yes.
Yet the surface remains totally still.
And this brings us to a core rule in the LMOS framework, which is called emotion as gradient.
Okay, wait. If we are ignoring the emotional narrative of the news, why are we looking at emotion as a gradient? What does that mean?
Well, what's fascinating here is that LMOS doesn't tell you to ignore emotion entirely. It tells you to stop treating it as a moral argument and start treating it as a mechanical sensor.
A mechanical sense. Okay, explain that.
Usually we look at fear, anxiety, or outrage in global news as just, media bias or political spin. But the LMOS framework says, treat that emotion as a heat signature.
A heat signature. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that fear and anxiety shows you exactly where the pressure or the gradient, in engineering terms, is concentrated.
So the strong emotions we see in the international sphere aren't necessarily wrong.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They are just pointing to a massive buildup of systemic pressure that simply hasn't breached the surface yet.
Okay, I think I get it. It feels like standing on a frozen lake.
Frozen Lake, yeah.
You look down, and the surface looks perfectly smooth. It looks completely safe. You could ice skate on it, but if you stand still and listen, you can hear the ice groaning and cracking in the distance
Yes.
because the water currents underneath are violently shifting.
That is a perfect visualization. The currents are raging, but the ice is holding. So the question then becomes, analytically speaking, what is the ice?
Right. If the pressure is violently shifting underneath, what exactly is keeping the surface so calm for all of us? Like, what are we actually standing on?
Well, to understand that, the sources break down the structure of this silent crisis using a model called UTRM.
Let me stop you right there. Another acronym.
I know, they love their acronyms.
Let's spell it out before we dive in. What is UTRM?
It stands for the Underlying Temporal Response Matrix.
Okay, temporal response matrix, meaning how long it takes for a part of the system to respond to a shock.
Precisely. It categorizes the world based on the speed of reaction. And it splits our global energy system into three distinct layers: flow, rule, and human.
Flow, rule, and human. Okay, let's walk through those mechanisms because this is where the mechanics of that ice really start to make sense.
Let's start at the bottom, where the currents are raging. That is the flow layer.
Okay.
This layer is all about expectation, raw capital, and future pressure. It includes the geopolitical events you mentioned, missile strikes near critical shipping lanes, sudden embargoes. But it also includes massive financial movements, like the staggering billions in capital being poured into those AI data centers that will require massive amounts of electricity 5 years from now.
And the defining characteristic of this flow layer is its speed, right? Because the geopolitical intelligence reports note this moves incredibly fast.
Incredibly fast, yes.
We are talking about changes that happen in seconds to days. A headline breaks, a drone strikes a facility, and the capital markets and algorithms react almost instantly.
Yes, the flow layer is instantaneous. Now, sitting right above that fast-moving current is the rule layer.
The rule layer.
This is the shock absorber, the ice itself. It consists of pricing mechanisms, futures markets, government policies like strategic petroleum reserves, and long-term supply contracts.
Okay, I want to drill down into this because it feels crucial. How exactly does a rule absorb a physical shock?
Good question.
Like, say a shipping lane is attacked and a tanker is physically delayed. How does a long-term contract act as a shock absorber for a physical boat?
Let's use liquefied natural gas, or LNG, as an example.
Okay, LNG.
Let's say a local utility company that provides power to your city has a 10-year contract to buy LNG at a fixed price of, say, $8 per unit.
Right.
Suddenly, there is a conflict in the Red Sea. Shipping insurance premiums skyrocket. The physical cost to move that gas just doubled.
Because it's way more dangerous now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the utility company doesn't care because their contract mathematically locks in their price at $8. The financial instrument, the contract, meets the volatility.
Oh, I see.
The physical ship might be delayed, the insurance company might be taking a massive loss, but the price mechanism holds firm.
So the rule layer operates at a medium speed. Changes here take days to years to fully play out. It's the buffer zone.
Exactly, the buffer zone. And finally, sitting at the very top, protected by that buffer, is the human layer.
That's us.
That's us.
Man.
This is our real-world reality. It involves the guy at the gas pump, the factory manager trying to run an assembly line, the average person paying their heating bill.
And this layer is incredibly slow. We are talking months to years for changes to trickle up here, precisely because the rule layer is shielding it.
Shielding it entirely, yes.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources point out that having these three different speeds is actually a massive vulnerability.
It is a huge vulnerability. The LMOS framework identifies a catastrophic speed and shear problem happening right now.
Speed and shear, like wind shear.
Similar concept, yeah. The time granularities of these three layers have completely separated. The incredibly fast-moving flow of geopolitics and capital is utterly detached from the slow-moving human reality at the top.
Right.
And because they're moving at wildly different speeds, the layers are physically shearing against each other, almost like tectonic plates.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because if I'm a consumer listening to this, I'm thinking, well, good.
Right, it sounds ideal.
Yeah, if the rule layer, the long-term contracts, the government subsidies, the futures markets, if that layer is absorbing all that fast-moving shock from the bottom, isn't that a positive thing?
It seems like it.
It protects us. I mean, I don't want to pay double for electricity just because a drone flew over a strait somewhere across the world. I want stable prices. Why is stability dangerous?
It's a very natural assumption to make. We are completely conditioned to view price stability as systemic safety.
Exactly.
But the sources introduce a concept here called over-rectification. In the white papers, they sometimes use the Japanese engineering term for it, which is kajisiri.
Kajiseri. And that means
It means the system is overly smoothed out.
overly smoothed out, meaning the shock absorbers are working too well.
Basically, yes.
Again, I struggle to see the downside there. If a car has a great suspension system, I don't feel the potholes. That's just a good design.
Let's use your car suspension analogy because it works perfectly. A good suspension absorbs the bumps so the driver has a smooth ride. That's normal rectification. But imagine a suspension system so incredibly over-engineered that you could drive over a 3-foot deep crater at 80 miles an hour and feel absolutely nothing in the driver's seat,
Well, it sounds like a great car.
right up until the axle snaps in half.
Ah.
Because the physical force of hitting that crater didn't just magically disappear. The energy of that impact had to go somewhere.
The laws of physics still apply.
Exactly. If it didn't go into jostling the driver, it went into the metal of the axle, the joints, the chassis.
I see.
Over-rectification means the shock absorbers are taking on so much cumulative hidden damage to keep the ride smooth that the system will eventually fail catastrophically. And it will do it with zero warning to the driver.
Oh, wow. So the driver doesn't even know they need to slow down because they aren't feeling any feedback from the road.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to realize that silence does not equal stability. Historically, if energy prices were stable, it meant the physical supply of energy was actually stable.
It was a one-to-one relationship.
It was a simple one-to-one relationship. But today, stable prices just mean the system is completely over-rectified.
Kajisiri.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The massive shocks from the flow layer, the geopolitical tension, the exploding AI power demand, they are being entirely absorbed by the rule layer. The heat hasn't disappeared. It has just changed locations.
Right. So it's being absorbed by government debt, maybe, or by insurance companies taking huge losses, or by energy companies leveraging their balance sheets just to maintain those fixed contracts.
That is exactly what's happening. And the sources categorize this using a specific historical framework. You mentioned the STA 9.2 energy phase earlier.
Yes, let's finally decode that one. What does STA 9.2 actually mean?
STA stands for Structural Transition Assessment.
Okay.
It's a way economists classify different eras of global supply chains. Earlier phases, like, say, the 1970s oil crisis, those were characterized by a visible physical friction.
Right.
You had a shock, and immediately you had empty gas stations and lines around the block. That friction was highly visible in the human layer.
The feedback from the road was immediate. You hit a pothole, you felt it.
Right. The papers classify those as Type A or Type B crises. But Phase 9.2 is totally different. It is characterized by something called Type F, which is silent accumulation.
Type F. So what happened to types C, D, and E?
They represent a sliding scale of financialization over the decades. The further down the alphabet you go, the more advanced the financial markets and government policies become at hiding the physical reality.
Oh, that makes sense.
So by the time we reach Type F, the crisis is purely structural. The financial layer is so thick, so complex, that it can hide a massive physical energy shortfall from the public for years.
Years.
Years. The crisis is accumulating, but it's completely unobservable in our daily lives.
So it's almost like a heavily medicated patient.
What do you mean?
Imagine someone who has a serious advancing illness, maybe a failing kidney or something, but they're on a massive experimental dose of painkillers.
I see.
They feel absolutely zero pain. They wake up, they go about their day, they assume they're perfectly healthy because literally nothing hurts.
Right.
But the underlying disease hasn't been cured at all. It's just quietly advancing day by day, completely masked by the medication until the organ just shuts down entirely.
That is exactly what is happening structurally. The global energy system is transitioning from a state of smooth operation into a state of severe systemic wear and tear.
Yeah.
But this phase transition is happening entirely without noise. The friction is there, the damage to the axle is happening, but the noise of it is being muffled by the painkillers of the rule layer.
Which is terrifying, honestly, because usually wear and tear gives you warning signs.
It shows, yeah.
Your car engine starts making a weird ticking sound before it breaks down. You get delays, you see rising costs, you feel the burden.
Okay.
And that forces you to adapt.
Exactly.
But here, the conditions for a crisis are completely met. The event just simply hasn't triggered yet.
It is a state of suspended animation. The energy isn't necessarily missing, it's just that the gap between the underlying pressure and our daily reality is being silently stored as potential energy inside financial mechanisms.
So what does this all mean for us? Because if the transition is completely silent and the feedback loop is totally broken, how do we know when the medication wears off?
That is the big question.
How do we know when that buffer finally breaks?
What it means is that we have to fundamentally reframe how we are looking at the world, because this is not actually an energy shortage problem.
It's not.
No, the world has physical energy. What we have is a problem of over-rectification and silence. The threshold we need to watch for isn't necessarily a pipeline shutting down or well running dry.
It's a structural threshold.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
The breaking point is the moment when pricing mechanisms and government policies can no longer absorb that massive differential from the flow layer. It happens when, say, the government can no longer take on debt to subsidize the consumer price, or when those 10-year LNG contracts expire and suddenly have to be renegotiated at reality-based prices, and the utility company realizes they just can't afford it.
And the sources point out something really fascinating about what happens when this silence finally breaks. Because the system is so over-rectified, the failure isn't going to look like a traditional energy crisis.
No, we won't.
It's not going to be people lining up for gas with jerry cans. It's going to manifest in really unexpected places. They mention a transition into what they call urban calcification.
Yes, urban calcification, that's a crucial concept.
How exactly does a hidden energy premium cause a city to calcify?
Well, think about a major city's budget. If the real underlying cost of energy has secretly doubled, but the prices have been artificially smoothed out by subsidies and debt, the city continues to build energy-inefficient infrastructure.
Because they think it's cheap.
Right. They build sprawling transit systems or massive glass skyscrapers that require enormous power to heat and cool because they falsely believe power is still cheap.
They are making 30-year physical decisions based on fake subsidized signals.
Precisely. Then, when the rule layer finally breaks and the true cost hits, the city realizes it physically cannot afford to operate the infrastructure it just built.
Wow.
They can't afford to run the trains at full schedule. They can't afford the heating bills for the municipal buildings. So they have to divert all their capital just to keep the lights on.
Which means they stop doing everything else.
Exactly. They stop fixing potholes. They stop upgrading water lines. They stop innovating. The city's growth just freezes up. It calcifies.
Because all the capital is suddenly sucked into the reality of the energy costs. That makes total sense. And the sources also mention something called incompatibility errors.
Yes, incompatibility errors.
That sounds like my laptop crashing, not a global energy market.
It is very much like a software crash, actually.
Ah.
An incompatibility error happens when two systems can no longer communicate.
Okay.
In this case, the financial market's mathematical expectations completely detach from the energy market's physical reality.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. The financial model might dictate that a barrel of oil should trade at, say, $70. But the physical reality of extracting and shipping that barrel now costs $90.
Because of the hidden friction.
Right. So when the financial system refuses to price it at 90, the physical producer simply stops pulling it out of the ground.
They just stop.
They stop. The systems become incompatible. The trade physically cannot execute. It's a systemic software crash rather than a physical fuel shortage.
I find myself slightly unsettled by all this, though.
It is unsettling.
Because if this entire STA 9.2 phase is specifically designed to be invisible right up until the moment it catastrophically breaks, how do we, or the people listening, actually track this?
Right. We can't see the numbers.
Yeah, we don't have access to the raw data of every global LNG contract or municipal debt sheet. We are just normal people looking at the news.
This raises an important question, though. And it is the exact question the LMOS framework wants you to ask.
Okay.
When you are looking at a system under immense strain and the surface is perfectly still, you don't look for the noise. You watch what isn't moving.
Watch what isn't moving. That feels counterintuitive.
It is, but it's the core of the strategy.
Yeah.
Let's say a massive geopolitical event happens, like a major conflict breaks out in an oil-producing region.
Right.
That should cause a massive spike in prices. If you look at the market and the prices don't move at all...
People usually think that's a good thing.
Exactly. They think, oh, we avoided a crisis. But that isn't a sign that everything is fine. That is a glaring, flashing warning sign that a massive amount of pressure was just absorbed by the rule layer.
The silence is the signal.
The silence is the signal. The more heavily regulated and mathematically stable a price remains in the face of absolute chaos, the more physical tension is building up behind that specific membrane.
That completely flips how you read the
It
news.
really does.
Instead of looking at a stable utility bill or a stable gas price and feeling comforted, you start asking, who is paying to keep that price stable right now?
Right. Is it the government taking on debt?
Or is it a corporation bleeding cash? And for how long can they physically afford to keep paying it?
Exactly. You look for the accumulation of silence. You look for the gap between the speed of the headlines, that flow layer,
Mm-hmm.
and the sluggishness of the real-world response.
Yeah.
That gap is the shear. That gap is where the danger actually lies.
So to everyone listening, take this LMOS framework and try to apply it to the world around you. Because the core theme here is that the most critical changes happen in silence.
Very true.
Look at your own industry, your own investments, or even just your own daily life. What areas look suspiciously calm right now, despite the massive shift in currents happening globally?
A great question to ask.
And more importantly, what unseen structures are silently absorbing that pressure for you, keeping the ice perfectly smooth for now?